What you're seeing here is possibly the most iconic bodybuilding footage in existence, first shown to audiences in the hit 1977 film Pumping Iron. This film showcased Arnold Schwarzenegger's battle against fellow competitor and future Incredible Hulk star Lou Ferrigno. Many associate this film with the beginning of bodybuilding, and while it did help make it more mainstream, bodybuilding's beginnings can be traced much further back. In this film, I'll be uncovering the history of bodybuilding. Strength training has been part of human civilization for centuries, evidenced by ancient training tools such as halters and Indian clubs. Looking back at ancient Greek statues, one can even see an early understanding of the muscular skeleton, along with the idealization of a muscular and well-developed physique. But it wasn't until the 19th century that training literature was first published, such as Muscles and Their Story and the Indian Club Exercise. These books gave recommendations for training with dumbbells and Indian clubs. In 1896, weightlifting would make its debut at the first modern Olympic Games, and this centre stage would help propel it as a sport internationally, leading to early gyms such as the YMCA incorporating weightlifting into their training mandate. It was also around this time that the father of bodybuilding would emerge, Eugene Sandow. Originally a circus performer, Sandow became the disciple of strongman Louis Attila, who noticed his talent for weightlifting. After winning strongman shows across England, Sandow toured with Broadway impresario Flo Ziegfeld. During their tours together, Ziegfeld noticed that audiences were more amazed by Sandow's physique than his actual feats of strength, and suggested to Sandow that he put on muscle display performances in addition to his regular strongman feats. These muscular posing routines were well received by audiences and helped bolster his popularity. Sandow went on to open his own training institutions, start his own magazine line, and even write a series of books on how to train. It was the title of one of these books that helped popularise the term bodybuilding, a term which had actually been quietly coined by Boston YMCA trainer Robert J. Roberts back in 1881, something he's not often credited for. Sandow went on to create his own line of workout equipment designed for bodybuilding. This came at a time when workout equipment was still in its infancy and people were using this thing. But Sandow wasn't alone in his bodybuilding pursuits. In 1899, Bernard McFadden would launch his Physical Culture magazine in America, soon selling over 100,000 copies monthly. The late 19th century also saw the emergence of several other notable early strength athletes who advanced bodybuilding in their own way. Perhaps the most significant of these was George Hackenschmidt, who is famously credited with inventing the bench press. In 1901, Eugene Sandow held the very first bodybuilding show at the Royal Albert Hall in London. The event was attended by 52 contestants who battled for the grand first place prize of 1,000 guineas. The event even had Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, famous Sherlock Holmes writer, as its head judge. The show would be won by William L. Murray of Nottingham, England. This was followed up by Bernard McFadden's own bodybuilding show in 1903, which was held in Madison Square Garden, New York. Notably, McFadden's show was partially filmed and also included women. The early 21st century marked the sharp advancement of physique development among bodybuilders, thanks to more established training methods and equipment. Weight training was also starting to become more accessible, evolving from a circus act to a niche but respected hobby. Training literature became more widely available, and new bodybuilding icons emerged, such as Charles Atlas, whose famous ad campaigns filled comic books and magazines. But it would be Eugene Sandow's own bodybuilding apprentice, Francis X. Bushman, who made the biggest splash as an early physical icon. After roles in hit films such as Ben-Hur, he became one of America's most famous silent film stars, thanks to his physique that first got the attention of film producers. But by the 1930s, bodybuilding was more than just a Western phenomena. Muscle Control and Barbell Exercise, published in 1930, gives a glimpse into the impressive form of many Indian bodybuilders at the time. That includes this guy, who apparently died because he tried to hold a cart of 24 people on his abs. I'm not joking, that's legit how this guy fucking died. The 1930s and 40s would see a rise in female bodybuilding icons, with perhaps the most well known being Abby Stockton. Alongside writing for Strength and Health, Abby was also a famous model, featuring in Life magazine. Most notably, she even trained Marilyn Monroe. The increasing popularity of bodybuilding also meant that a new fitness market was beginning to emerge, as the 1930s and 40s saw the first wave of modern multi-station gyms. Clunky equipment of the past quickly became outclassed by new gym equipment. Gone were the days where Sandow alone was advertising malt extract. Now the fitness market was grown to accommodate a wealth of new training and dietary products. Bob Hoffman and Joe Weider would quickly lead the bodybuilding market, with both selling their own range of bodybuilding equipment and supplements. They were also bitter rivals who tried to hinder each other at every opportunity. This rivalry would gain momentum when Joe Weider and his brother Ben would form bodybuilding's most significant federation, the IFBB, also known as the International Federation of Bodybuilding. The 1940s saw a rise in competitive bodybuilding internationally, kick-started by the first Mr America competition in 1939, which was organised by the Amateur Athletic Union. The event became increasingly competitive throughout the 1940s and 50s. The first wave of true bodybuilding champions emerged, such as Steve Reeves, who used his bodybuilding platform to kickstart an acting career. Following the success of the AAU Mr America, the IFBB launched their very own Mr America competition in 1949. UK Bodybuilding Federation NABBA formed the following year and launched their own Mr Universe and Mr Britain competitions, adding to the competitive architecture that was beginning to grow within bodybuilding. But the closer competition was leading to more extreme methods of physical preparation. That's where steroids came in. The story of when anabolic steroids began being used in bodybuilding is a murky one, but most accounts say that it began here, at the 1954 World Weightlifting Championships in Vienna. Here, the Russian weightlifting team would use them with great effect, winning the most gold medals in the competition. Witness to this was American physician and avid weightlifter, Dr. John Ziegler. After hearing that the Russian team had been using testosterone, he began experimenting with it upon his return to America, focusing his efforts at York Barbell Club. This included him providing it to club members, such as former multiple-time Mr America winner John Grimmock. From here, Ziegler began to work with Swiss pharmaceutical company Ciba to help develop and test their newly refined steroid methandrosterone, now more commonly known as Dianabol. Ciba Pharmaceuticals would begin commercially selling Dianabol in 1958, and from here, it wasn't long before steroids were ingrained into bodybuilding. By the 1960s, the Mr America and Mr Universe competitions were becoming notoriously competitive. But the most intense rivalry would be between the IFBB and AAU, as they battled over whose titles were more prestigious. Bob Hoffman, who played a major role in the AAU, continued his feud with Joe Weider and the IFBB. This led to Hoffman announcing that the AAU would ban entry to all weightlifters and bodybuilders who entered IFBB shows. Joe and his brother Ben reacted to this by launching a new prestigious title to entice bodybuilders, the title of Mr Olympia. Taking place in 1965, the first Mr Olympia competition was won by Larry Scott, a former winner of the Mr America and Mr California title. But after Larry Scott's retirement the following year, the Mr Olympia struggled to become the premier bodybuilding show that the Weider brothers had pinned it to be. The show still faced heavy competition from NABBA's Mr Universe overseas, which at the time was still seen as the most prestigious title in bodybuilding. Joe and Ben didn't like that, so to steer bodybuilders away from the competition, they created a policy which banned competition entry to those who'd recently entered non-IFBB shows. A policy which shared striking similarity to what the AAU had previously implemented against the IFBB. However, this policy would initially backfire. Subsequent dropouts due to lack of eligibility meant that the winner of the 1971 Mr Olympia would run completely unopposed. But luckily, their winner will be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Known as the Austrian Oak during his bodybuilding career, Arnold Schwarzenegger made a major splash into the bodybuilding scene when he moved to America and began training at Gold's Gym. He began to quickly ascend the bodybuilding ranks, winning numerous Mr Universe titles. He'd come back from a 1969 loss to Sergio Oliva to win the 1970 Mr Olympia. Although the notorious 1971 Olympia saw Arnold win unopposed, the following Mr Olympia competitions would see him compete against world-class bodybuilders such as Frank Zane, Sergio Oliva and Franco Columbu. But it was his 1975 Mr Olympia win which would be the subject of Pumping Iron, the docudrama which would go on to change bodybuilding forever. First released in 1977, Pumping Iron showcased Arnold Schwarzenegger's rivalry with Lou Ferrigno, as they both took on the 1975 Mr Olympia. The docudrama, directed by George Butler and Robert Fury, gave audiences a real insight into the strange and vibrant world of bodybuilding. Arnold would come out on top against Lou Ferrigno, along with besting other top bodybuilders such as Serge Bray and Franco Columbu. But his win at the show would pale in comparison to the success of Pumping Iron. It instantly became a critically acclaimed success and helped bring muscularity into the mainstream. Arnold would officially retire from bodybuilding at the 1975 Mr Olympia, with Frank Zane claiming the title going forward. Arnold would return at the 1980 Olympia and reclaim the title in a highly controversial win, but this would mark his last competitive bodybuilding showing. Arnold's success was about to outgrow bodybuilding. The success of Pumping Iron propelled Arnold into stardom, and he became bombarded with new opportunities in both film and advertising, like this really weird advert. Seriously, what is this? Co-star Lou Ferrigno would also land high-profile roles as a result of the movie's success, such as The Incredible Hulk and Hercules. Pumping Iron was finally bringing bodybuilding into the spotlight, and its release through America into a fitness frenzy. The docudrama helped shift public perception of weightlifting from a niche hobby for outliers to a fashionable activity in the pursuit of self-development. Women bodybuilders would finally get an opportunity to compete on the big stage in 1980 when the IFBB introduced its Miss Olympia competition. The show's first ever winner, Rachel McLish, would go on to star in the lesser-known Pumping Iron 2 documentary. While Rachel boasted an impressive athletic physique as a champion, the following decade would see women bodybuilders increase exponentially in size. After being showcased to the world in Pumping Iron, the Olympia became cemented as the world's premier bodybuilding show. But with the show's prestige came a higher level of competition and a tougher bar for entry. The 90s would usher in a whole new level of size when it came to bodybuilding, as the sport took a direction into the unknown extremes. In particular, PED use vastly increased among competitors. The bodybuilding physiques of the 50s and 60s began to look worlds apart from the 90s bodybuilders, with the era becoming well known as the age of the mass monster. This era would culminate in bodybuilding's greatest rivalry, as Jay Cutler and Ronnie Coleman repeatedly battled for the crown of Mr Olympia, with many now considering Ronnie to be the greatest bodybuilder of all time. Today, the Mr Olympia still stands as the world's top bodybuilding show, although the show's classes have been greatly diversified for both men and women, as has been the case for other major shows. Perhaps the most notable added class is the Classic Physique division, which aims to replicate the look and feel of the bodybuilders of the 60s, 70s and 80s, a time which is now commonly referred to as the golden era of bodybuilding. Alongside the incorporation of more bodybuilding classes, there has also been a rise in natural bodybuilding federations. These federations use a combination of polygraph and drug testing in order to create a safer and more level playing field for competitors. Bodybuilding now also has a supplement industry worth over $61 billion yearly, an amount which is testament to bodybuilding's growth and transformative journey over the last century. Eugene Sandow died under odd circumstances in 1925, but I wonder what he'd think of bodybuilding today. Would he marvel at some of the current larger-than-life bodybuilding physiques? Or would he see them as a move away from the Grecian ideals he was once so invested in? Would he see performance-enhancing drugs as a marvel of science? Or a move away from his purest view of physical development and health? We'll never know. But what we do know is that Eugene represented an early age of bodybuilders who, despite having very little to work with, persevered to help see bodybuilding through to what it is today. Eugene and many of his early lifting comrades may be long gone, but they're not forgotten. Perhaps this is best encapsulated with the Mr Olympia Trophy itself, which is modelled off of Eugene's physique and is accordingly named the Sandow.